The most iconic Czechoslovak fighter biplane of the 1920s was definitely Avia BH-21. And to talk about its development is pretty much also talking about early years of Czechoslovak Air Force. When it was established in 1918, Czechoslovakia possessed ragtag mix of planes inherited from Austria-Hungary, bought from Germany and received from France. And especially the initial French influence was prominent when looking at the inventory of fighter fleet. This was dominated by altogether 117 Spot 7 and Spot 13 aircraft. But despite being successful in the World War I, when Czechoslovakia received them, they were heavily worn out and dangerous to fly, which was leading to frequent crashes. And there was initially pressure from French military mission to Czechoslovakia to replace them by procuring nuke fighters from France, but after quite an easy political struggle, this was rebuffed and Czechoslovakia decided to focus on domestic air industry instead. And since the early 1920s, companies Letov, Aero and Avia started to produce relatively capable fighter planes of their own design. Avia company is particularly interesting for this video, since over time it became dominant supplier of fighter planes for Czechoslovak Air Force, but the road to that position was really not straightforward. Chief designers at Avia, Pavel Beneš and Miroslav Hein, were believing in, at the time, unorthodox monoplane design. In 1922, they even managed to push through acquisition of 10 BH-3 low-wing monoplane fighters by Czechoslovak Air Force. And this was soon followed by a series of light trainer monoplanes such as BH-9, BH-11 and so on. But in the times of biplane dominance virtually everywhere in the world, both Air Force leadership and pilots quite naturally distrusted these monoplanes. And this culminated in 1924 when Avia was working on new modern-looking low-wing monoplane BH-19. But its prototype was destroyed during speed trials in August 1924, and this proved to be a last straw, with Czechoslovak Air Force losing last bits of trust. And even though the real reason of the crash was actually the rupture of pilot's appendix during the flight, it led to cancellation of order for 66 machines and final warning from the Ministry of Defense for Avia not to pursue works on monoplanes and focus on developing biplane designs instead, or risk losing future orders. This might as well be a great example that history every now and then tends to regress backwards, or simply that the monoplane designs were not mature enough at that time. Luckily for Avia, the designers were since 1922 in parallel working also on a biplane project built around Hispano-Suiza 8FB engine, which was offering promising performance. And this ultimately resulted in a series of 24 unremarkable BH-17 fighters. But after the failure of its monoplane cousin, this type was further improved into its final form of BH-21. The plane itself was of a conventional design for its era, being an unequal span biplane of wooden construction and with a tail skid undercarriage. Its trademark, however, as with many other Avia designs at the time, was having no fixed fin, only a rudder, and the stability was provided by a slab-sided fuselage. And another typical element of its construction is an upper wing with a shorter span than the lower one. The Hispano-Suiza engine allowed it to reach top speed of 245 km per hour, and it was still armed just with two 7.7mm Vickers machine guns in the upper front fuselage, because domestically designed aircraft machine guns came into service only in the beginning of the 1930s. The total cost of fully equipped aircraft reached 314,000 Czechoslovak crowns, with engine accounting nearly for half of that sum. Between 1925 and 1928, 4 series of 137 planes in total were produced. However, it was not the only fighter type in service with Czechoslovak Air Force at the time. Avias were supplemented by 105 Š-20 fighters produced by Letov, and thus giving Czechoslovakia a total fleet of 242 fighters in the second half of the 1920s. And just for comparison, British Royal Air Force, according to plan from 1923, was supposed to field a home defense force of 52 squadrons equipped with 550 frontline aircraft of all categories, with fighter fleet roughly matching that of Czechoslovakia in its size. Besides sizable production for Czechoslovakia, Avias also enjoyed export success in Belgium, which showed interest in the type in 1926. For evaluation purposes, the Belgian Defense Ministry bought 3 different types of fighters: WWII D-19, Avia BH-21 and WWII D-9, and each of these was delivered to the operational squadrons for individual testing and evaluation. As the Avias were powered by the same Hispano-Suiza engine which equipped the previous type in the Belgian service, the Port 29, it meant that spare parts and large stocks of this engine were available. Another positive moment was a remarkable aerobatics capability of Avia BH-21, and it was thus favored by the Belgian authorities over both French types. Very soon the decision was taken to order 45 BH-21s, and single plane was acquired from the parent company Avia, while license production for 39 was granted to Belgian Sapka company, and another 5 pieces of BH-21 were produced by Sega. In Czechoslovak service, aerobatic capabilities of the type were highly appreciated, which in turn brought fame to numerous pilots flying BH-21 both on domestic and international arena. One of them, Captain František Malkovský, had his personal plane painted red, earning him the nickname Red Devil, which, besides from giving name to this video, clearly echoes German World War I ace Manfred von Richthofen and his red-painted Fokker triplane. Captain Malkovský was the second European pilot who managed to perform outside loop, and his fame made him sort of a pop star in his era, widely known to the general public, which is something hardly imaginable for pilots today. These very favorable flight characteristics, along with high production numbers, made Avia BH-21 ideal basis for further development. Besides 2 pieces of racing specimens, the most numerous type developed from Avia BH-21 was a special training version called BH-22. Powered with weaker engine and with slightly shorter fuselage, and of course without armament, it offered Czechoslovak Air Force chance to massively expand training in aerobatics. Altogether 40 planes were built, and 2 of these were reverse armed and used as experimental night fighters. Progressively, however, from the early 30s, the original BH-21s became obsolete in their fighter functions, so they too were relegated to training. And since their wooden construction was of course not very durable in the long run, by the mid-30s there was a surplus of remaining engines. Czechoslovak Ministry of Defense decided to utilize this stock by ordering last batch of 10 pieces of this type. Slightly modernized and dubbed BH-21 and produced in 1934, some of these remaining planes miraculously survived with military air school in Prostějov till 1938. The assessment of the importance of Avia BH-21 for Czechoslovak and Belgian air forces is tied to the already mentioned supreme aerobatic capabilities of this type. Many Czechoslovak and some Belgian top-scoring pilots of World War II started their career flying this type. On the other hand, its all-wooden construction was quickly becoming obsolete in the late 1920s, with air forces around the world quickly switching to metal designs. As such, its initially again wooden successor, Avia BH-33, took a long time to mature, and it happened only when completely redesigned, replacing the wooden fuselage with one made from welded steel tubes. Avia BH-21, with its construction philosophy, appearance and characteristics, thus represent ultimate developmental form of fighters as we know them from World War I, and its service marks end of peaceful interwar era and start of a direct preparation for the other, much worse World War. That's it from Golden Era Weapons for today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and we will hopefully see you soon.